of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And Dr. Baldwin, let's use this final 10 minutes of this show to give you an opportunity to expand in a real sense upon some of the issues dealing with the suffrage. As a matter of fact, I think the last time you were with us, we talked about the contemporary Black Lives Matter movement, and now that movement has become widespread. The knowledge of it has become widespread throughout the United States. And so if you want to bring in some additional information in reference to that and the voting rights, just feel free to deal with that kind of information.
And it's interesting that you would bring that up, because many who are fighting for expanded voting rights are also bringing in this Black Lives Matter dimension, and that movement too is becoming a part of the voting rights movement, because it all has to do with respect for the sanctity, the sacredness, the dignity and worth of Black life. That is, we need to have God-given rights that all other citizens have. That is the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the right to vote as well. So what we are seeing today, among Democrats especially, is a call for the upgrading of the Voting Rights Act to reinstate this principle of pre-clearance, to make sure that there's some federal oversight over voting practices in states that have a history of discrimination. I mentioned before the break that Democrats have come up with the Voting Rights Amendment Act of 2015, which is about reinstating federal oversight. Some are saying that we need that oversight in 13 states, mostly in the South, that have a history of discrimination. President Obama had said that September 22nd, 2015 will be National Voter Registration Day. So he too is calling for an upgrading of the Voting Rights Act so that states won't have complete freedom in determining who should vote, or in determining what procedures should be used in the processes of registration, of voting, and election. So I think these are important developments, and if you ask me, I would say in the 2016 presidential election, voting rights will be a very prominent issue, because Republicans have essentially lined up against what's going on with the Democrats in terms of this push for more federal oversight over voting practices and registration procedures in the South.
And so in a real sense, excuse me, Dr. Baldwin, that the right to vote is so essential to democracy that if a person is eliminated or disfranchised in terms of voting, then he has no real participation in the process of government itself.
Exactly. And what you see with the voter ID laws and other restrictions are really attempts at voter suppression. And we noticed in the 2014 congressional elections a decline in Black voting, a decline in other areas of voting, such as the elderly. Certain demographics are being what? Are being excluded by these rigid, strict ID laws passed by the state of Texas and other states. So what we have here, as you said, of course, is a threat to participatory democracy. This country was founded on the principles of participatory democracy. And when you deny people the right to vote, or you come up with restrictions to the right to vote, then you are really what? You're really threatening the very processes of participatory democracy.
And when some folks are denied the right to vote, others are discouraged from voting because they now believe that it really does not matter about voting because, quote, their vote will not, what, count.
Exactly. And some elderly people have already complained. They've spent 5 hours trying to get, as much as 5 hours trying to get a voter ID. There are problems with traveling. There are problems with having the resources to get access to the ballot. So what we have today is really a threat to democracy in this country. And I think President Obama, Congressman John Lewis, who was very much involved in the voting rights struggle in Selma, Alabama in 1965, what they are telling us is that we need to what? Upgrade the Voting Rights Act and continue to renew it because it is much needed in a society in which there are still patterns of discrimination, personal and institutional.
Very good. Dr. Baldwin, we've got about 4 minutes here. What I'd like to do with this time is to look at some of the activities that are going on now in the various states. For example, I think Oregon has almost universal suffrage in a real sense through the states, which is to say that people in Oregon, once they reach, I think this is what I know about the law, once they reach the age of 18, they are automatically registered to vote. And so there's a larger percentage of Americans or people from Oregon that are involved in the political process in that state. Do you think that that would be efficient in terms of allowing that? Because sometimes I think ago, people talked about allowing registration through the post office, registration through the internet, and there are all ways in which people can register now if we are concerned with trying to expand the whole operation of democracy in the United States.
Yes, I think with the Oregon statutes or laws can serve as a model for the nation, because after all, we're trying to expand the reach of democracy. Interestingly enough, in states like North Carolina, there used to be pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds. That has been cut out. So what we need to do is to put in place the kinds of guidelines that would encourage people to register to vote. But what you see with these voter restriction, ID laws, and other statutes or principles put in place is an effort to really restrict, to obstruct, to suppress
in a real
voting. And I think you're right. What is happening in Oregon, and of course it is this exception more than the rule, needs to be a model for the nation if we are interested in what? In increasing voting rights, which are, of course, at the core of any participatory democracy.
That's right, and we can't have a democracy if we say the people are not participating in it, and if the people become discouraged in terms of participating, and if they're driven away from the polls, then it's difficult to argue that we have a democratic situation.
That's right. I'm rather concerned about 2016, the presidential election, because I think many of these ID laws, and they're in place, as I said, in 34 states, some of them very strict, very rigid, is that these laws will have an impact on the presidential election. And that would be very unfortunate, because, you know, we want to make sure that our presidents are democratically elected, that we have the broadest possible base of democracy. When we are talking about presidential elections. And now that, of course, is threatened by many of the laws we see put on the books in certain states today.
And do you think the current effort on the part of Congress to deal with the Voting Rights Act, do you think that that might bring in more folks?
Yes, I think, and it's an effort put forth by Democrats, essentially, on the